Guys, we may or may not be live. I don't know yet. There's always that bit of a delay. Let me know if you're able to hear me because sometimes that part doesn't work either. Let's see. We want to make sure we change this to HD.
Guys, we may
there's the
may not
volume.
be
Let's
live.
mute that. There we go. So again, make sure that you change your video quality, the little icon there, change that to HD. That's going to make a big difference for you. And you can see I've got my pencil drawing lightly sketched out, which you can actually hardly see here. Oh, good. Alex can hear me. So if you did not already see the notice that I posted on Patreon, if you're watching from Patreon directly, I posted a link. You'll just have to refresh that page. I posted a link to this video over here on YouTube. You're going to want to come over to YouTube if you want to talk with us because I won't be able to see any comments you leave on Patreon itself right now. Plus, Patreon is having some issues today. They had an update last night and there is some weirdness going on. I don't really know what their problem is right now, but I know I was having a hard time sending messages earlier and reading comments. I commented on this video and all the comments went away. It told me there were 8 and I could only see 2 and I don't even know what's going on with that right now. I apologize. I have a head cold right now, so I sound like a mess, but we should be good. If I have to sneeze and cough a lot, I'll try to remember to mute the camera. So what we started with, this paper that I'm using here is just the Strathmore drawing. It's not my usual Fabriano Artistico or anything like that. It's fairly inexpensive. And I actually do like this paper. It's got a really nice tooth. This would probably be my favorite paper to draw on with colored pencil if it was heavier weight. It's only, I want to say 80 pounds, but it's a thin 80. I mean, this stuff rips so easily. So I wouldn't want to work on this on something that I really wanted to last a long time. It is archival. It's just so flimsy. So again, not my choice for colored pencil if it's something that I really need to last a long time. But if it's something like this where I'm doing a demonstration where it's not, you know, something I'm going to frame and really care much about, then this paper is really a nice tooth. At least for me, I really like it. It's the paper that I used for years. It takes the color saturation really well. Everything's great there. So again, that's the Strathmore drawing, their 400 series. It's just too lightweight, I think, for something that you really care about. So for this one, I'm actually going to start on the ribbon because going up against white paper, and I'm not going to do a whole background on this. I'm going to leave the background white and then add the reflections. But this is a lot of white paper. So let's start with the green ribbon. And you can draw your ribbon any color that you want. You're mainly going to want to choose 3 colors. Your lightest tone, a mid-tone, and a dark tone of that color. So light purple, mid-purple, dark purple. Or in my case, light green, almost a fluorescent yellowy green. I'm going to use polychromos for that. I'll tell you which color I choose if you're working with polychromos too. I'm thinking I'm going to go with my light green polychromos. And let's see, for my mid-tone, I will probably, let's see, picking colors. I know, super exciting. Aren't you glad you tuned in for this? I'm sitting here picking through my pencils, deciding what I think the mid-tone should be. I'm actually going to test this up here. It's a little dark. That should work though, if I layer it with my light green. So there's my light green. And even that, I could go a little lighter. Maybe add some yellow to it. 1 second, and I will tell you what to go with. So I'm going to use my yellow lemon mixed with the light green. That should give me my lightest color, these two mixed together. So light green and lemon yellow are going to be my choices for my brightest green. Then I'm going to use, was that emerald green? Nope, that is too light. Yeah, it was this one. I'm going to use Hooker's Green for my mid-tone. And then for my darkest, it'll probably be one of these two. Let's go. That might be a little bit too blue. Nope, too green. Okay, for my darkest, I'm going to be mixing cobalt green with some black. And if you're watching, I'm just going to throw this out there. I know you guys right now are watching live, but if you're watching this later on, if you're not watching December 1st at 2 p.m. Central Time, you can, if you ask questions, I'm not going to actually see them real time or be able to answer in the video. I know that gets confusing for some people. With the live stream, I'm only going to be able to respond to you during this time. Sometimes it seems like it's a happening live when you watch later on. It's not. It's only for those of you who are here on December 1st at 2 p.m. Central Time that I'm going to be able to actually respond during the video live. Okay, so those are going to be my green colors. I'm also going to use a bit of black because you guys know how I like my black pencils. So far, everything I'm using are polychromos, but you can use any pencils you have. And again, you can use any color that you have. You just want to get a light, a mid, and a dark tone to use with those. Hold on one second. I am missing something. Grab my jar of all of my miscellaneous pencil supplies. I've got some pencil extenders in here I'm going to need. Sharpen that black pencil. Oh, it's too short for that one. Oops. My black pencil just fell into the pencil extender. Come on. Give me 1 second here. Oh, still too short. Okay, new sharpener. Let's try something else. And of course, the first sharpener, I'm a mess this morning. First sharpener I grab is, nope, that's not working. Okay, let's try another route. My black pencil is really short. My pencil extender is fighting with me right now. So I'm trying to find a sharpener that can handle the shorter lead, and I can't find them. There they are. Okay, now we should be good. I can sharpen pencils. Okay, so what I'm going to do is start with my lightest yellowy green color on mine. So going by that reference photo, you want to, if you don't have this, you can download the reference photo that I'm using over at Patreon. So everywhere where I've got my light color, I'm just going to go ahead and fill in with this yellow. It's a very cool green, yellow. Jackie wants to know when my ink tins will be available. You know, they're available in some stores. I don't know when everywhere is going to get them. I suspect that it's going to be when each store runs out of the old tins. But I'm not sure because I know some people have gotten the new ones. So technically they're available. It's just finding a store that has the new ones in stock. I'm being pretty messy here. I'm just going in little ovals. I'm not worrying. And one of the nice things about this, you don't have to worry about everything being perfect. If my ribbon is shaped a little different, not a big deal. If my yellow is in slightly the wrong place, again, not a huge deal. I'm not going to worry about this green on the bell just yet. We'll come back to that later. Now this line I have in pencil was a guideline, but I'm pretty sure that would show through this yellow, so I'm just going to erase that now, and then I can go ahead and go up to it. Now I'm putting this yellow a little bit further into where the darker green is going to be because the dark colors cover it just fine. I would rather go too far with yellow than not far enough. So pull some of this. I'm not going to do a ton of detail. The texture and the ribbon, I'm not even going to worry about that. What I'm worrying about are my lights and my darks. I'll go looser here. I'm not worrying about getting good, great coverage. I just want to get a little bit of a light tone there. Okay, let's see, we'll get a highlight here. Now I will do highlights with my touch-up texture titanium white mixture, especially on the bell. So make sure if there's anywhere you want to stay really white and you're not using that product, take your white, any white wax-based pencil. So like this area on the bell here that's going to be white, you can fill that in, and I would burnish, push pretty hard anywhere you want to be super, super white so that you don't have color pigment really get into the paper there and stain it. Otherwise, you're not really going to get it back light enough. Patty, I'm not using sanded paper, so I'm it really doesn't apply to this project. If you're working with Powder Blender on sanded paper, no, you can just work directly on it, but your techniques may be a little bit different because of the layering process. I'll probably do another one just with Powder Blender, not today, but we'll do another project with that. But for this one, I'm just going to be blending with odorless mineral spirits. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take this one was the light green. I will go right over that. But anytime you're working with sanded paper, there's nothing to prep it with Powder Blender. So with this green, I'm going to layer it further into where my medium, I'm going to make up words, medium green is going to go. And then I will layer that on top of this one. Because I'm using odorless mineral spirits, you can see how the paper's a little bit grainy and gritty, hopefully. If the camera is good enough that it's picking that up, it doesn't really matter because the odorless mineral spirits is going to cover a lot of that for me. But I do want to try to get really good coverage, so that minimizes that from happening. Pull this light green down here. And there will be a bit of a shadow or a reflection coming under that. I'm going to come back to that later. Now, the nice thing with colored pencil, there's no definite rule of you have to do this section first and then you have to do that section first. There are 20 different ways to get to the same end. You're just going to figure out what works best for you. So like where I said, I'm going to come back to that shadow later. It doesn't mean you can't do it now. It just means I'm not interested in doing it yet. And I missed out some of my drawing where the ribbon is going to go. I'll freehand that in later. I'll go right over that lighter yellow and then fade that in a little bit. So see how I'm overlapping these two colors? This is going to give me a nice soft transition. And this really will be more of the medium green, but I'm going to go put that on a little bit there first. Now what I do is I work, because I'm calling out the names that I'm using right now, but that's not something that I typically do. So one of the, Patty, your Fabriano Artistico, cold press is going to be really bumpy for you. You can use it, but it's going to be rough. You're not going to get as smooth as what I'm able to get on the hot press watercolor paper. Cold press is very rough. This is going to get really dark as I move down, so I'll go ahead and stop with this color here. Now you don't have to push very hard for this. I'm keeping a light hand so that I'll be able to get lots of layers. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and switch to one tone darker, so that is the Hooker's Green. Actually, I should probably sharpen this first. I want to keep that edge nice and clean there. Now watch your edges. I can be soft and kind of fuzzy in the center, but those edges need to be kept nice and clean. Especially being that I'm leaving the white of the paper showing through. I'm not really going to be able to fix if I get really fuzzy edges, other than just making the ribbon bigger to cover those. Pushed a little bit harder on the edge to make sure I kept it clean. Actually, it looks like I didn't quite come down far enough here. Let's pull that color back in and then get my light green on top of it. Just slowly building up these shadows. Little bit of detailing in there. Now it appears at this point as you're working, you'll feel like this medium green that you're using, or medium tone that you're using, whichever colors you're working in, that it is dark, you know, your darkest shadows. I've got one shade darker that will come on top of this. So remember, this is your medium green. And actually, I want to take my light green. Where the heck did I put it? There it is. I want to pull this down a bit further so that I can layer this medium green on top of it. I want to clean up this edge. And I've got a bit of detailing there on the edge of the ribbon here. Doesn't go all the way around. It looks like I went a little too far here. Let me find an eraser. Maybe. There we go. I'm going to use the Faber-Castell ink eraser. Now, erasers only help a little, and they only really work if you haven't already blended out with odorless mineral spirits. If I did come through this already with odorless mineral spirits, this isn't going to lift because it's already pretty much saturated into the paper. But I know I want more of a highlight there, so I was able to lift some of that out. And I want that to stay really light. Again, want to make sure this is nice and crisp. I will have a bit of a shadow under this section, so that will make the bow stand out a bit more. Now the shadow, I'm tempted to just do that in graphite because it'll look how I want it to and be so much easier. We'll see. Graphite powder especially would make that go really, really quick. Now, anytime I mix graphite with colored pencil, I want to make sure that I'm not putting them in the same section. I'm not trying to layer graphite on top of colored pencil or colored pencil on top of graphite. They don't really stick on top of each other that well. Let's pull that light green over here. Karen wants to know if I keep my reference photo close when I work. It's actually on a 27-inch monitor that's about 2 feet away from my easel. And I have a wireless mouse that I take over to my easel with me, and I just enlarge it, depending on which section I need to see better. Make sure I've got these nice crisp edges. Actually going to pull this yellowy green into this first so that it brightens that up. And then I'll put the medium green on top of it. I keep saying medium green. What I call medium green, again, is just hooker's green. But yeah, keep your reference photos near you. That, I think, is a really big deal because you want to look at them constantly. If you're working to get something very realistic, you really want to pay attention or be able to look at a reference photo. This isn't something where you would want to look at it once and be like, okay, it's a bell and a ribbon. I know what that looks like. I'm ready to go to town. It's not going to come out looking as realistic. Okay, we've got the ribbon over here. Bottom edge is a bit darker and the upper edge a little bit of light. So I'm actually pushing a little harder right here where I want to clean that up. I don't really need to blend it with odorless mineral spirits. And I'm not going to need to do a lot of layering, so it's okay if I push a little harder and damage the tooth of the paper. And that's the reason that you don't typically want to push very hard on your paper when you're starting, because it does damage the tooth of it, making it so that you can't add additional layers. But if you already know you're not putting additional layers in an area, then it doesn't really matter. Especially on a small area like that. Got a bit of a highlight at the end of this ribbon. Doing little ovals here, just getting a solid coverage. Actually, I'm going to pull this, whoops, I'm going to throw my pencil first, and I'm going to fill this in a little bit further down. And I'm going to let this fade all the way up here into the yellow and lighter green. Now, what I like to do is look at my reference photo and line things up, because I'm looking at this going, okay, how far up does this green need to come, or this medium green? So I go to my reference photo and I can see it comes up to about this area. So I'm just going to go across and go, okay, there's where I want to pull it up to. So you're going to use your reference photo or one area of your drawing to line up another area. You want to make sure everything is balanced that way. So I know I can just go right about there is where I want this to come up to. So check your work against itself. Not that this has to be perfect, but it's a good habit to get into, especially if you like to do portraits, because that does need to be more perfect. We're pretty close to it. Okay, that is actually, I'm going to take a little bit of my darker color first, and then I'll go ahead and blend that out. 1 second, I've got some emails from Patreon. Let me make sure you guys aren't having trouble. Dan wants to know if this is one of my own photos. I can't see on the emails what that went to. If Diane, if you're watching and that came, you're asking about the bell we're working on right now. Yes, it's one that I took myself, so you can use in your work. You can definitely post to social media. Okay. So this is one shade darker. That is kind of a bluish green. Is that the one I went with? I guess it was. Let's go ahead and sharpen that. And I want this pencil to be really sharp because I want to make sure, I broke the tip a little, I want to make sure that I can keep clean edges here, which will be even more important later on after I blended this out. Then I'm going to clean it up even more. But I've really got to watch these edges. When you work with a white background, it's a bit intimidating, honestly, because one little mess up and that's it. You no longer have a white background and now you've got to fill it in with another color to hide those mistakes. So you've got to be really careful. I mean, it saves time when you do. I actually like the way white backgrounds look, and it saves time being that you're not having to do a background on something. So some portraits look amazing against the white. The problem is if you screw one little dot somewhere and the white background's all over you, you really can't ever get it back perfect. Not when you're working with colored pencil. So what I would typically do if I were working on something like this, if this is something I was going to sell and was worried about that, I would make sure that I had glassine under my hand so I wouldn't be smudging, because this I'm probably going to end up smudging, being that I'm being lazy right now. And that also protects the work from any oils in your hand. So definitely a good habit to get into. So I'm pushing a little harder there where I want that nice crisp line up against the bell. Pull that highlight right in through there. Same thing, I'm going to take this highlight here on the top and define that. I'm pushing a bit harder where I really want that to stay crisp. So much more pressure with that pencil there. A little bit of a shadow here and there. I'm going to go ahead and blend with odorless mineral spirits. Now you will typically see me use my bigger brush. If I can find it, I'll show it to you. Where are my, oh yeah. I did pull those out before. I really like to blend with this brush. This one is a number 8 Low Cornell Filbert. It's a tack on bristle. You can see the edges are a little frayed because I use it a lot. And I would use that for filling in a larger background, something big. This is tiny. I need to switch to a smaller brush. So I'm going to use this one. This is a flat, just generic number 4 something or another. I probably got it Hobby Lobby. You don't need super expensive brushes for this. But generally speaking, tack on bristle filberts are my favorite. But then when I need something small and have clean edges, then I'm going to go with this. Now, here's another thing. I want to keep this paper white. Now, if you're using a toned paper like Strat, I've seen this a lot with Stonehenge, because Stonehenge, not only do you get the nice tan colors or whatever color you want to go with, they have tons of different colors available. That paper is so absorbent. Alan Woolett calls it sponge-henge, and that is a very accurate way to describe that paper. The problem with that is that it sucks up the paint thinner like crazy, and sometimes you'll get oil stains. So you really have to be careful. You wouldn't want to oversaturate your brush and have it all over, because you may see oil stains that don't dry all the way. Now, if I were painting a background, that doesn't matter. It's going to cover it. But because I'm leaving the white of the paper, I want to be very, very careful. This paper doesn't leave stains as bad, but I want to be careful. So what I do is I dip my brush in the paint thinner, then I take Viva paper towel. You can also use an old rag. Bounty, any other brand of paper towel won't work. It has to be Viva. So Viva or an old t-shirt, old rag, that will work. I'm just going to dab some of that paint thinner off, and I'm going to be very careful where I blend. So, starting with these lighter areas. Now, the color saturation is not quite as deep as I want yet. That's okay. See how it makes it almost a little dull as it dissolves into the paper? That is okay. Don't let that bother you. That just means you need more color. Diane, I know you're watching, you're messaging over on Patreon. If you want, I'm not going to be able to keep seeing those because it comes through on email and Patreon's been really flaky today. Head over there. I posted a link in the comments and in the video or the description over on Patreon. You can actually watch this over on YouTube and you'll be able to comment to us here. Oh, you are here. You're just commenting all over the place. I feel loved. Okay. See, I'm being really careful along those edges. I don't want to get paint thinner all over the white of the paper because I don't want a chance at leaving an oil stain. Again, as I reload that brush, so this is the first time I've reloaded. You don't have to keep dipping the brush in paint thinner again and again. A little bit goes a very long way. I reloaded it for this. It was starting to get a bit dry. Now my first layers, I typically use a bit more paint thinner than I do on my later layers. As I get build up where I've got a lot of pigment on the paper, I need less and less paint thinner each time. Because if you have too much paint thinner as you move on, it'll get to where you're actually lifting some of that pencil off the paper instead of blending out. So I'll probably do one more layer or set of layers on top of this when this portion dries. Once I get this blended with the odorless mineral spirits, I'm going to let it set for a bit to dry, and I'll start working on the green ribbon in the shadows. Or at least draw out what I forgot to draw out. One or the other. You don't want to use a hairdryer. You'll see me work when I'm using ink tints or acrylics. I'll use a hairdryer to speed things along. Don't do that when you're working with colored pencils and odorless mineral spirits because odorless mineral spirits are flammable. Let's not start fires. So that's good. This little brush lets me get these tiny little details and keep it nice and clean. Now, I was just working in a dark area. I'm going to go into a light area. So I'm going to actually take my brush and rinse it out really well in my paint thinner and then dry it off on the paper towel and make sure I don't have a lot of dark green coming off. The paint thinner is a brush cleaner, so that's all you need to clean your brush. But watch that when you've been working on a dark area and you go to work on a light area, it's really easy to forget that you had recently been blending, let's say with black, and you go to blend yellow and you get a huge horrible smudge that is very difficult, sometimes impossible to hide. So you want to be aware of that when you switch from using the same brush to blend a dark area with a light area. I almost made that mistake last night. I was working on a butterfly, or it could be a moth. I'm actually not sure on that one. I think it's a butterfly, but I was working on that last night and I had forgot I had used that brush on a dark area and I almost touched that brush to the white portion of the butterfly wings and thought, I just barely stopped myself and thought I better test this first. Sure enough, there was a ton of black. It would have been a disaster. I would have been able to hide it to an extent, but I'd always be able to see where I smudged that dark where it wasn't supposed to be. It doesn't mean I couldn't still make it look good, but it wouldn't have been exactly what I wanted to start with. See, I'm working on these edges, keeping them really clean. And for different papers with colored pencils, I definitely recommend trying a lot of different ones, but I wouldn't try one after another in a row. I would say use one paper a few times. Like with me, I was using this paper forever. I was very comfortable with this paper. And then I tried the Bristol Vellum. I liked that it was thicker. If I hadn't used this that much, I wouldn't really be able to easily compare or have too much of an opinion on the vellum. I wouldn't have realized how bad the color saturation was on vellum in comparison had I not used this several times. Then after the vellum, I went ahead and tried Fabriano. Now, I wouldn't have appreciated the Fabriano or realized the things I liked about it, both good tech tooth at the time anyway. I don't know if the new ones still are, but I wouldn't have known that had I not tried the vellum several times. You want to give each paper, I would say, a couple of tries, with the exception of if you've been using a paper that you like for a long time, and you try a paper and it's terrible, like the colored pencil paper that Strathmore makes, that I only needed to use once to know that was not going to work for me, mostly because the paper was warping and it was so thin. Those were my biggest two complaints about that paper. Well, that and terrible color saturation. Okay, I guess I have a lot of complaints about that paper. But definitely, normally I would say try each paper a few times before you try the next, because if you try all of them one after another, it's hard to remember what you liked and disliked about any specific paper if you've only used it once. Except for the colored pencil paper. I will never forget what I hated about that one. So again, making sure that edge is nice and clean. You don't want to sit and do a brush stroke like this all over because I'll get fuzzy edges. So as I'm moving this brush, I'm holding it to the side. It's flat, so I get a nice smooth edge. See how these blend nicely into each other. This is why I wanted to blend or layer the yellow, and then I put the light green on top of that, and then I blended the hooker's green over that a little bit, and then the darkest green over that. I layered this one over another, and now I'm getting this nice transition from one to the next. If you just do a harsh line, almost like a paint by number, where one color starts and one color stops, you're not going to get this smooth of a transition. You want to overlap them a bit. Okay, so that should be pretty good for my first layer, and we'll let that dry. And while that sets, I'm going to put the lid on my paint thinner. I don't want to leave that open because while it is odorless, you don't want to breathe that in. It's not terribly healthy for you. So if I'm not using it at the moment, I always put the lid back on it. Okay, so let's see. What do I want to work on next? Let's go with the ribbon, and that switches. Now the reflection in the ribbon, you would think I'm just going to use the same exact color that I used up here, but you don't want to do that. This is actually a more grayish cool tone as I move into the reflection on the bottom. Now if you want to get a reflection, if you're taking reference photos like I've done here, all this is a whiteboard. I have a whiteboard for the sole purpose of getting nice reflections for photos like this. And a lot of the reference photos that I provide for you, which I need to edit and get the December month out for you, but a lot of those reference photos, they're taken when you see a reflection under it like this. That's all this is a nice whiteboard. I got a big one for cheap at like Walmart, or maybe I got it at Hobby Lobby. I don't remember. And that's where I set up those photos. Okay, I need a grayish. This one should work really nicely for a lot of these colors. This one is earth green. It's almost a sage grayish green, and that's going to work for some of my reflection. And let's see if I've got another shade up. Let me get more natural tones with my luminance pencils. Those have some really nice natural colors. And I could actually check my Pro Color too, but they are in a box that is not over here, so I'm not using those today. Let's see. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna test this. It's a little on the grayish side. That layered with this might do it. Bold, but close. Let's see if I can go a little bit lighter. So what I've done, this tape that I have taped along the edge, this is a low pH or a pH neutral black tape that I get. You can get them on Amazon, I think. And this, I want to say, came from Jerry's Artorama. And I've taped off where my artwork is, and I've left this section. This is a part of the same paper, but I didn't cut it off because I can use it to test my colors. Just makes it easier. You can also have a scratch piece of paper next to you. So let's see if this is any better. Yep, that's actually a really good tone. It's a little dark, so I'll have to put some white over it, but that should work for the darker. I would actually like even lighter. Let me see. So this is how I figure out, because people are, that's a very common question. How do you know what colors to use? I test. I try a couple colors. It may work, it may not. If I push hard, that gives me the lighter version of that. I may need a more lime green in there though. Let me see what happens when I take this over it. Okay, so this is actually going to take several colors to get my reflection of the ribbon below. I am using my Polychromos. Oh, I hate how tiny these are written. I can't read them. Light malachite, I believe. Light malachite green. I'm going back to that light yellow, or it's cadmium yellow lemon color that I used on the ribbon initially. And I'm using earth green from Polychromos and then my white luminance. I may end up going with my white names. They're hard. Derwent Drawing, Chinese white, which is not over here. 1 second. Let me go grab that. Grabbed a few of my Derwent Drawing colored pencils while I was over there. Okay. So we've got a shadow. This is a dark shadow coming this way. I've got a curve that needs to come this way and just kind of fade out. Now this is a lot more challenging than the ribbon. And again, we're not done with the ribbon. I'm going to put another layer over that. That's just my base. That covers my white there. Okay, so scary time. This is hard to hide if I mess up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm really light. I am not pushing hard at all here. A little bit of that there. I'm going to pull a little bit down here. I don't care if these are exact to, you know, the shape to the reference photo. I just want to go for close. And then let's see. Taking now my earth green. This doesn't touch the ribbon there. There's a little bit of a lightness of the other shadow, which is not this one. It goes that way, so I don't quite meet that. Those are the type of little details. Well, in this, not a big deal if you don't have it exact, but it's a good habit to get into noticing things like that as much as you can, so that when you do get to do something where it does matter, like a portrait, then you're used to, let's see, to looking for little things like that. I'm going to very lightly, whoops, wrong pencil. That would not have been what I wanted. If you listen to Pandora and you need a nice playlist to listen to while you draw, strongly recommend making a Bal Maria playlist. That's what I'm listening to right now. It's so pretty. See, I'm just going to go ahead and go right over that. Now this is really dark, a lot darker than what I really want my end result to be, but I'm going to go over that with my white Derwent Drawing, so I can go a little darker right now and be safe. I want this to be a bit cooler, so I'm taking now, this is that light malachite green. I'm really not sure what Caran d'Ache was thinking when they printed the names on these pencils. You cannot read them. That's one thing I love with the Pro Color, the Derwent Pro Color. You can see the colors. I'm testing out the I tested out the Marco Renoir colored pencils. They're cheap ones you can get on Amazon. They're from China. They're about $50 for a set of 72. Not Lightfast is the only really bad thing with them. But for somebody who's learning, they're actually decent to work in. And those pencils, the back half of them is the color, like this much, which is nice. And just a number. There's no name of the actual color. That was tough because I'm not going to remember numbers. I might barely remember a name of a pencil. So it was hard because some of the colors were so mislabeled. It would look like it was going to be a purple and it was really a bright magenta pink color. So not having a name to refer to, that was unpleasant. Okay, let's see. Maybe a little bit more of this earth tone in here. I'm going to go a little darker there. A little darker here. This is going to go right up against a darker shadow. And I kind of want it to fade out a bit more. So just a little teeny tiny bit of color so I don't have a harsh line there. I want to zoom this in. Okay, so this can go a little bit closer than what I've got. Just want a little gap. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one. Now I'm going to come down. I've got the same thing here. So I'm going to start with my yellowy green. Yes, it's light. What did I say that was? Oops, wrong green. Cadmium yellow lemon is the lightest color that I'm using. You don't have to use the same color. Just grab a pencil. I mean, a light color is what I want. What you want to watch for are your values, how light your lights are and how dark your darks are. One of the things that will hang you up and keep you from really getting to where you're very confident in your work and aren't constantly struggling with color is to get over worrying about it. Worry about your values. You can worry about your color later. You know, the more you paint and draw, the more you're going to figure out what you like and dislike about different color combinations and such. Don't worry so much. That's one thing that I don't typically tell you guys as I'm working. It was this color. Always use this color here. Use this color there. The thing with that, if you're always depending on somebody, like in a tutorial, always depending on the exact color, you're never going to learn to mix them. You're never going to learn to blend them. So when you have your own project you want to paint or draw, you're not going to know what to do because you never bothered. I don't want to say bothered. That makes you sound lazy. That's not what I mean. You never experimented. You never experienced figuring out color on your own. You have got to figure it out and you've got to experiment. If you're not willing to experiment, you're never going to learn. So don't worry as much about color. I am mentioning the colors I'm using now, but when you watch my videos, when you watch any videos, try not to get too hung up over what color to use and when. Okay, so we've got here, let's see. What about here is where I want that ribbon to come. Oh, that comes way up. Let's see where this one connects. Right about there. Yes, I always talk to myself when I work like this. And this is going to overlap. Thin out quite a bit here. This is, again, not something that needs to be perfect, so I'm not going to sit and, I'm not worrying. Normally I would use a pencil, a graphite pencil with so I could erase if I wanted to adjust things. This doesn't need to be perfect, so I don't really care. I just want to get kind of close. I'm barely adding pressure. And that will fade into a shadow. Patty wants to know about the Soho pencils that came with powder blender. I didn't get any Soho pencils with powder blender. I know nothing. I've never used them. I really don't know anything about those, so I don't want to share an opinion I haven't formed yet. I actually would be interested in getting their light fast ratings, and if their light fast is decent, then I would be more interested in trying them out. I mean, even with the Marco Renoir colored pencils, I probably wouldn't have gone and bought them myself. The only reason that I have them is the company actually contacted me asking me if I wanted to try them out. They saw my review on the Marco Refine. So they said these ones were better and if I wanted to try them. Sure. I've had a few requests, so that's why I got those. But I typically wouldn't go spend much money. I mean, I wouldn't spend $50 on a set of pencils that weren't light fast myself. Considering I have all of the light fast ones. Or all these, I shouldn't say all of the. I don't have all the pencils available. So lightly going over this. This is the earth green. But if you're struggling with color, this is where you want to have like what I've got here, scratch paper, where I can test, try a couple of colors and realize, okay, that's close enough for what I want. I can use that. Or, oh, that color combination did not work at all. That's why you want that scratch paper. That's going to make it less scary. Don't experiment on your project, experiment on some scratch paper. And that's how you're going to learn to mix and blend colors. If you constantly follow tutorials where you're having your hand held too much, if you never take those training wheels off, you're not going to learn to write on your own. And I mean, it really is the same thing here. So we're going to take this one is that light malachite green, my luminance. Again, if you don't have the same colors I'm using, not a big deal. Just find something that's similar. My main goal here is I want these to be more of a grayish cool color than the bright actual ribbon. The reflection I'm toning down quite a bit. Now what I will do is blend this out. Actually, I've got one more, I think, reflection to do. I'm going to blend this out and then I'm going to burnish white over it to tone it way down. Let's take some of this green. This one is the light green. I'm going to pull a little bit more of that so it stands out when the white goes over it. But see how I'm just experimenting? It wasn't something where I knew, okay, these are the colors I have to use. This is what's going to go here. This is what's going to go there. I experiment. It's like, let's see what happens if I put this color. If it's good, great. If it's not the end of the world. I'll just put another color over it. I'm sure you guys are sick of being lectured about that, but it's something I've seen so many students hung up over and not progress because they're too afraid of color. They're too afraid of not choosing the right color. I want to see you guys have fun and be willing to experiment because that's what's going to make you get really good. Try different things. Some of those things are not going to work, but that doesn't mean you messed up. That's part of how you learn. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and blend these out now because the ribbon up top, this ribbon is dry enough. I'm ready to work on it again. So I'll blend this out. While that dries, I can go work on the other part of the ribbon. If I can find my paintbrush. I am constantly losing my brushes. I don't think this is the same one, but it's close enough. Yeah, this one is one size up from the other one. So getting that brush wet. Now this is going to be a bit grainy and gritty because I used such a light hand and I didn't put that many layers on it. That's okay. When I burnish it, that'll smooth it out. When I burnish, I'll use the white Derwent drawing. This is the same thing. I've got to watch that I keep that paint thinner in the drawing portion because I don't want to stain my paper here that I plan to leave white. See here, I went outside a little bit. I got a little bit of that oily color or the odorless mineral spirits. I had too much on my brush. So that may be a little bit fuzzy. It'll mostly dry, but you'll probably still see a little bit. Okay, we'll let that set. Put the lid back on my paint thinner. Nikki asked how I stay motivated and want to draw when I'm in a lot of pain. You know, I mean, if you look, one of the reasons I'm doing this video is I was so behind. I've missed so many weeks and keep posting old content that I've added voiceover to or things that I didn't have longer tutorials to because I was in a lot of pain recently from all my surgeries. So it took a lot for me to heal this last time. And so I wasn't getting as much work done. I think you have to balance. I mean, if you're in pain, if working is going to make it worse, you have to be willing to say, okay, I need to not work on this right now today. This one, I'm going to go back to my cadmium yellow lemon and add this all over the place. But if it's pain that it's not going to make any difference if you're in pain or not, sitting and working isn't going to matter, then for me, a lot of the stuff I got done in the last few weeks was because I was required to. Like I had to do the video for Liquitex because I had previously agreed to. I had some commitments I had made that I needed to follow through with because when you're working for different companies or they hire you to do something, they don't care if you're sick. So that for me, that motivates me in needing to pay my bills. That's, kind of a big deal. So that helps. But sometimes other things in general, like for me with the fibromyalgia, that sometimes isn't even so much about pain because I control my diet enough that I'm rarely in actual pain. I'm mostly just so tired now. But the pain from fibromyalgia, as long as I've got that under control, my thing would be I'm so tired I don't want to work. And the way that I get through that is usually by finding music that motivates me. Or sometimes going on a walk, even though I'm too tired to do it, go on a short walk and it'll kind of be like, okay, it's pretty outside, now I want to go draw these things. So those are things that kind of help me. But you've got to be careful. I mean, especially when it's your back. You said you have a pinched nerve in your back. Be careful not to sit in a way or do anything that's going to make that worse because that's going to make the healing time even slower. So I'm not really going up to the edges so I can go through this pretty quickly. Just layering these in. Again, don't let these shadows that are super dark right now set you off because those are going to be a lot lighter soon. So it appears like you've got this super dark thing that it's not going to stay that way. And I'm pretty much putting this lemon yellow over everywhere on that ribbon. Now my color saturation is going to be much, much better. And you can repeat this. I'm only going to do 2 times of adding the layers and blending out with the odorless mineral spirits. You can do more if you need to. Light green next. As long as you're not pushing really hard, you're using a light hand. You're not going to end up. Sorry. Whoops. Stupid spam caller. Let me get rid of that. There we go. You're not going to hit a point where you can't add additional layers. Just keep a real light hand, and if your first few layers are too gritty or they're not smooth enough, add more until it's as smooth as you want it to be and the color saturation is as good as you want it to be. Mary wants to know, when using texture fixative, how far away do you keep the fan from the art while I spray? Wait, no, how far away do you keep the fan? I'm not sure what fan you're talking about. When I spray it, it's usually a foot or so away from the artwork, but I don't know what, I don't have a fan. And then Nikki said that going back to the pain in her back, she's got a little feeling in her right calf right now because of the pinched nerve. Sitting makes it way worse. You may try a standing desk for backs. My mom, she also has ankylosing spondylitis, runs in families. And for her, she can't sit at all, but she can stand and work. So, I mean, depending on your situation, standing could make it worse. So I'm not going to give you medical advice, but you might try it and see if it helps at all. And this blends so much smoother now that I already have a layer on there of pencil. Well, several layers. One second, checking more Patreon emails. Okay. So just kind of loosely. See, I'm not working in tiny, tiny circles and making it perfect at this point because I already have the layer down there. It's already pretty smooth. I'm just getting pigment on there so I can go through this a little bit faster than I did the first time. I'm going to go a shade darker, so I'm going to switch over to my Hooker's green. Again, really making sure those edges are nice and clean. And this is where I start to worry more about my contrast, getting that more accurate. Okay, Mary said, yeah, I meant to say how far do you keep the can away? That makes way more sense. Yes, about a foot away is where I generally spray it. No closer than a foot, that's for sure. You can go a little bit further away too if you want a lighter mist. If you're getting hot spots where it's like coming out too heavy in spots, then back up even further. A very light mist is all you need. Now I want to be careful to leave some of these light areas light enough. It's easy to go too dark. And even here is a bit too dark where I smudged when I blended. So what I may end up doing if I don't get it light enough, I may come back through with my Touch Up Texture titanium white mixture, paint that area white where I want that brightest highlight on the ribbon, and then put the lighter green on top of it. Again, along these edges, I'm keeping really clean. I am adding more pressure to that brush, the pencil, to keep that nice and sharp. Karen wants to know, when I'm finished with a colored pencil painting, do I put a layer or two of fixative over the whole painting to protect it? No. If I'm using powder blender, then yes, and I use their fixative. But other than that, no. My pencils don't create wax bloom like Prismacolor does, so I don't need to. If you're using Prismacolor, you may want to use one of theirs. But no, it doesn't. The Polychromos, the Luminance, they really don't need it. And not all fixatives play nicely with all pencils. So if you decide that that's something you want to do, make sure you test it on scratch paper before you find out the hard way it didn't quite work the way you wanted it to. And this is still with the Hooker's green, which is my medium green. Just working in ovals here. Okay, let's see. I think I can actually pull this medium green up just a bit. I'm not going to push very hard here, but I don't want that light. I have pencil line that I either need to get it rid of or I need to pull my ribbon up to. Maybe a little bit of both. There we go. That lighter green going right over that. I'm going to take the dark green over that a bit. Nikki said, I know part of the reason I have a hard time wanting to draw is because I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And whoops, it went too far. And I need to tone that down. I expect too much for myself given that I'm just learning. You really do want to tone that down. I've had students that if they had a glass of wine, I mentioned that in the video that went up yesterday, the otter. I've had students that did really well if they had a glass of wine. I mean, don't drink a bunch of it, but just enough to take the edge off to make them not as neurotic about wanting everything perfect. You kind of have to get over that. Very, very important with art. I mean, you want certain things to be perfect. I want my edges nice and clean. Work on certain things, but don't be so worked up about everything being perfect that you don't move forward. Be willing to make mistakes too. That's what's going to make your work progress a lot faster. So here, that edge I want nice and clean. This one is my deep cobalt green. Jacqueline wants to know if I could only buy one, would I suggest the Polychromos or the Luminance? That's going to be personal choice and kind of depend on what you're doing. Like here, I want these sharper details. My Polychromos are my go-to pencil. When I want to blend smoothly like skin tones, then my wax-based Luminance are going to be my go-to pencil. So I think it depends on what you want to do. But I started with my Polychromos, which I loved, and then I slowly added a little bit more and a little bit more with the Luminance until I finally got my whole set. And that worked well. If you've got lots of fine detail, there really isn't anything better, I think, than Polychromos. Those are my favorite. I know some people will say the Caran d'Ache Pablos for fine detail. I hate them for that. I use them when I'm working with Powder Blender for final details. That I like them on sanded paper, but like this with fine detail, they're too waxy. They're basically to Luminance what Prismacolor Very Thins are to Prismacolor, and I've always hated the Very Thins. Even when I only used Prismacolor, I hated the Very Thins. I tried them. I like the idea of them. They just do not get the kind of detail that this does. They were too waxy. So for adding on top of something that already had a lot of wax, they just were not my preference. Diane said that she tends to procrastinate on her art because it's so discouraging when it falls short of her expectations. Really affects her mood. Try not to take it so seriously. All of us get that to an extent, but I think you need to learn at the same time to also celebrate what you've accomplished. You've got to be able to look at stuff and go, oh my gosh, I created that. This drawing may not be the best piece of art in the world. It's not going to win me any awards, but this didn't exist before I drew it. That's exciting. You made something that it wasn't a thing before. I mean, that's something to celebrate, and you have to teach yourself to view things. And that's so true with life in general, teaching yourself to view things a certain way. My grandmother is a great example of how your attitude affects everything in your life. My grandmother is one of the most negative people I've ever met. Everything's negative. I love her, but oh dear God, that woman can find fault in everything. I mean, anything that happens, she somehow turns it into that she was snubbed. I mean, making quotations because that's her thing. I was snubbed. She thinks everybody snubbed her. I feel so sorry for waiters and waitresses who have to deal with her. But anyway, because she's trained herself to view things negatively all the time, that's all she sees. Even when things are not negative, things are positive, things in her life are good, she doesn't see it because all she's done her entire, there's where I went out of the line. So I'm going to have to pull this up. I got a little bit of carelessness as I talked there. See how I pulled the paint thinner out? So I'm going to actually extend my ribbon in that shadow because I want that clean edge. And that is the only way I'm going to do that. Because that would have left a stain there that I wouldn't have been able to get rid of because there was green on my brush when the odorless mineral spirit went out. So I just extended the ribbon. Now only you guys know that happened. But anyway, because of how she's trained herself to see only negative, to only assume anything anyone says to her is somehow an insult. That obviously if they could tell her they liked her shirt and she thinks they're insulting her somehow. So and I'm not saying that's how you are. I'm just saying, she's a very extreme example on how you train yourself to view things a certain way. I remember when I was a teenager, I was probably 15 at the time, we would go on walks with my mom. And it was me, my mom, my sister, and one of my younger sisters, and our dogs. And I remember walking, and I would comment, "Oh, I don't like this in that yard. I don't like their fence. I don't like that type of bush. I don't like this. I don't like that." And that's all I was saying. And I didn't realize I was doing it. I was just sharing my opinion on things. But my opinion was only negative. That's all I had trained myself, because I was a teenager with issues. That's all I had trained myself, though, is to look for are the things I didn't like. And my mom called me out on it and told me to shut up. She's like, if you don't have anything nice to say, keep your mouth shut. I don't want to hear it anymore. And I remember being irritated with her, but all these years, I mean, God, that was so long ago, but I still remember that. And it was a wake-up call that I needed, for sure, because I was so negative. But I had trained myself to only see what I didn't like. And I had to, once, I got over my teenager attitude of being told not to do something, the more I thought about that, it was like, she's right. All I'm seeing is negative because that's all I've taught myself to see. And we do that a lot with our art. You have to learn to see the positive, to celebrate the things that are good. The fact that you created anything that didn't exist is something to be celebrated. That's a good thing. If you created something that is the ugliest thing in the world, you just learned what not to do next time. It's still a win. It's still a good thing. It's just a matter of training yourself to see the good things. Okay, so I'm now going to take my Derwent Drawing Chinese White, and I'm going to burnish right over this. I'm pushing pretty hard, or medium hard. It's not super, super hard. And see how I'm lightening all of that up. Going right up on that edge as well to soften that out. I'm going to do that on all of these ribbon reflections. I may do another few details on that ribbon once it's dry, but we're going to leave that alone for now, especially here. I'm going to need highlights. Let's see if that'll... Yeah, that paper's too wet, so it's not taking the pencil well, and I'm actually damaging the paper by doing that, so I shouldn't do it. I don't really care about this one myself. I'm trying to sell or anything, so I'm not being super careful. Okay, we are now going to start working on the bell. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to use my black polychromos, and I'm going to put in the darkest darks. Now, there's a couple of things on this reference photo. This area here, I've got this weird curve because it's reflecting my vaulted ceilings. And I am not including anything that extreme in this. That is not going to look very good. So I'm going to line where the darkest darks are going to go. My pencil is really sharp. I want those edges nice and clean. Okay, we've got a dark area here I can thicken up a bit. Now, I don't want to just fill this in black. That's going to have a lot of different shades of grays in there. So I want to pay attention to where the darks go. The reason that I'm starting with this is it's going to make it easier for me to judge the rest of my grays on this bell if I have some of my darkest values in first. Oh, you guys get to start listening to my stomach growl now. It's that time of the day. I apologize. It gets loud. I'm going really light. See how I pushed harder where I want it to be really dark and really clean edges. As I move up, I'm barely pushing hard because I want a lighter gray. Fem asks, No, wrong person. Patty asked, why the Derwent White and not the Luminance? It's the Derwent Drawing Chinese White, and it's because it's a waxier, thicker, more opaque pencil. It's going to give me a softer line. The Luminance I like for smaller details of white. It's a harder lead and not quite as opaque, but for like really, really clean edges, then the luminance is the one I want to go with. Diane said, I was raised by a super critical perfectionist, so it's hard to reframe my mindset. Trying. Yeah, it's not an overnight thing by any means. The big thing right now is just to recognize it's something that you're doing, that you tend to be negative about things, or especially with your artwork, and start kind of kicking yourself almost for doing that when you do. Just be aware that you're doing it. If, like with my grandmother, she doesn't believe she does it. She is so unaware that it's a problem, that it's not something that she's ever going to fix or change. She's done it her entire life. She's always been very negative, very nasty to strangers. She's one who thinks she's better than everybody else. So, like, I mean, everybody is below her. If you were a waiter, you are a nobody in her world. You are, her, basically a servant. And it's so embarrassing how she treats people. We always have to apologize and go back and tip more if we went out with her. It's, yeah, she can be embarrassing. But she's had a lifetime of this, and she's completely unaware that she does it. So that's why she's never going to change, and she won't listen when people tell her she's doing these things. But with you, you're aware that you're doing it. You're aware you're being hypercritical of yourself and your art. So that is something that you can change. It just takes time. That awareness or self-awareness in certain things like that is just such a big deal. So I'm not pushing very hard with this black. I'm going to go over it with gray in these areas. I'm just lightly blocking in where my general lights and darks are going to go. So I've pushed hard on the areas that are going to be super dark. This is starting to dry, so I can actually come up and add some of these deeper shadows with the black now on the ribbon. See how putting the dark shadow, getting that dark enough there, it makes the other colors pop. You don't need a lot. If you're adding black to different areas on that ribbon like I am now, don't go crazy with it. Okay, back to the bell. Now this, all of the, you're seeing these lights and darks in here, these are just reflections of what was in the room. This was in my dining room. It's just reflections of that. I don't need this to be exact. I just want to get something similar, some lights and darks thrown in there. The thing that I do want to watch is that curve, that sharp vaulted ceiling. That doesn't look good on the bell. It makes the bell look warped weird. So that's where I'm going to keep that toned out. Jacqueline wants to know how I keep the drawing pencil so light. I just don't push hard. That takes practice. I remember as a kid, my mom would color with me because that's what I wanted to do all the time. And I remember I pushed very hard with my pencils, like all kids do. And it would frustrate me because I'd watch my mom draw and you could just barely see the color. And to me, that was beautiful, that control. I wanted to do that. And so that's what I was always working towards doing. So then that just takes practice. But I mean, I've done that since I was young, so I'm really good with the light hand, but it does take a little bit of practice. I'm just barely letting that pencil touch. When you're working on something like this, try to think of it in terms of abstract shapes. I'm not looking at this and going, I'm making a bell. I'm looking at it and going, okay, there's a shadow that comes this way. There's a line that goes this way. Actually, now that I've got the black in most of this, I'm going to go ahead and pull some of the reflection of the ribbon, the green, into this bell. Now, Jackie has a good tip. She said, if you start writing down new positive things that happen every day, you start to look for positive stuff to write down. The very act helps you to retrain how you think and appreciate it more. And that is so true. Just training yourself to think that way, to look at things differently, getting in the habit of, I like this versus I don't like this. One of my big problems is, and I don't say it to people because I don't want anyone to ever feel bad, but in public, I'm so bad about judging what people are wearing. You know, that's inappropriate for that body style. This doesn't accentuate this. I can't believe this person's wearing that. And leggings aren't pants, but that sort of thing. I mean, I'm constantly, and so I have to kind of try to train myself in that case, because it's, not a quality I'm super proud of being that judgmental. One of the things that I try to do is instead, what do I like about that person? They don't care what I think. I'm not saying it to them and I'm not staring at them, but just as kind of a mental exercise to train myself to look at things differently and not find the things I don't like about their outfits. Cause yeah, people's outfits are really what matter in life, right? I look at things I do like. I like her hair color. I like whatever. And you start training yourself to look at it differently. Yeah, Diane said that the reasoning of her being negative about her art was to make her better at art. Yeah, was pointing out, I guess for talking about her mom. Yeah, being negative yourself about certain things is okay. You do learn that way. You want to be aware when things didn't go quite how you wanted them to, but not so much that you're not also thrilled about the good things. I was very lucky. My mom, and to this day, she acts like everything I touch is gold. So as a kid, she always did that too. I definitely, I recognize how lucky I was with how she was with that, or still is with that. But so I am sorry you're having to deal with that. That's definitely got to be frustrating. So I'm doing the color on the bell the same. The greens that I used on the ribbon are the same here. I need my hooker green next. Just paying attention to where these lights and darks go. Now I'm going to come on with my darker color, which is almost a bluish green. It's very similar to phthalo green. This one is deep cobalt green, but in acrylic painting, I would call that phthalo green. Okay. Patty says, fashion police is just fun sometimes, though. It is, but I find myself to where I start to only see negative in people that walk by. And so I try to also, when I see people, like if a cashier has nice hair, I'll try to tell her she has nice hair, not just for myself. I like to make people feel good, but, or, that her hair looked nice. I like how it's held up or whatever it is. But even when I'm not saying it to the person, I try to get myself to at least notice the positive in people. I mean, sometimes that's hard to do. You see things and you're just like, I can't believe you left the house looking like that. But seriously, leggings aren't pants, especially not if they're 18 sizes too small for you and we can all see right through them. But I don't know. I just feel happier when even with the fashion policing thing. Yeah, it's fun, but I feel happier when I'm looking at the positive in people more. I have a lot of family members who are mentally ill and bipolar, schizophrenic, excuse me, different ailments like that. And I just see how they view the world sometimes. And it's easy from the outside to look at it and go, okay, you're not looking at that right. You're making yourself even more miserable than you need to be. And so it's always kind of been a bit fascinating to me on how you can just view things differently. The same event, two people, especially with the schizophrenic bio dad, watching how he'll view a certain situation completely different than what actually happened. His brain is processing things so differently. And it's always kind of fascinated me how the way you look at things will completely change. Now, he's an extreme, but it will completely change your outlook on a situation from being, this sucks, to it's okay. Like, for example, my current health thing with all the surgeries, and this has not been fun. And I had a really hard time the first month, especially, was just not working as much as I am. Because you guys know I'm quite a workaholic. To not work as many hours. I physically couldn't, to be forced not to. First, I was freaking out. Like, how am I going to pay my bills? I mean, my income is what pays most of our bills. So I was kind of freaking out about that, freaking out about everything at that point. But once I realized that, I was still going to be able to pay my bills, I could still do enough work to get the Patreon stuff up for you guys, to get all of this done. It definitely made, I don't know, I started looking at things differently. Like, okay, where's the positive in this situation? For me, one of the big positives was that I am rethinking my entire schedule. I was working too much. I was, that sort of thing, looking at that. And now I'm trying to I want to make fewer videos for YouTube, but better videos on YouTube. Maybe longer, but better. Make sure my editing is better, everything. My main light color here, by the way, I'm going to use my Derwent drawing. This is Solway Blue. This looks like a nice gray, so I'm going to use that. But any light gray that you want to go with here. But I start looking for the positive in the situation, because it's so easy to only see the negative. And why did this happen to me? I can't, this has been painful. This has hurt my career. It's slowed everything down. So instead, I started focusing, especially over the last couple of months, what are the positives? What can I take from this experience and make better? So in this case, I've got, had the time to start figuring out, what can I do to make better videos? What can I change? What can I do here or there for whatever it is, and trying to see the positive. Whereas I see how family members who can't do that, they don't have the ability to really see things any other way. It seems like sometimes, especially the one who is schizophrenic, I don't know. It just has always been fascinating to me to take a situation and try to see the positive in things, or turn it in a way, just seeing how the way they would look at one situation, the same thing I experienced, they experienced totally different because of how negative they were about it, if that makes sense. So that's always fascinated me a bit, growing up with somebody who was mentally ill like that. Well, with a few people who were. But that's where I try to spend extra time reforming how I see things. And how can I like, even if something negative happens, how can I benefit from that? Like all of these surgeries, what can I change to make better, instead of sitting and moping and feeling sorry for myself? Yes, I like Karen Smith's way of looking at this. I'm so glad she wore those so I can see how they look. Now I don't have to wear them. Yes, that is a good way to look at that. Yeah, the leggings, that's funny. I actually love leggings. I wear them with every dress, or jeggings. I wear them under my dresses or under a long top. Like, I do not like how the current fashion is everybody wears them. This color I'm using here is Bistre. I don't know. I'm not saying it right. You guys are used to that. Yeah, I hate how leggings, it's like, for me, that's an undergarment. I've always seen leggings as being an undergarment. It's where you wear either for yoga or you wear it under dresses. So if you're older like me and you want to wear a short dress without looking like you're trying to be a 12-year-old girl, then they allow you to do that. Plus, I love wearing dresses, but I'm really bad about being girly enough not to flash everyone my rear. So if I've got pants and, leggings underneath, or jeggings usually for me, it's not as scary when I bend down to pick stuff up. Yeah, Jackie has a good point. One definite positive about all the health issues that I had, she said, was how much all of your Patreon peeps care about you from all around the world. That, seriously, you guys made me feel so good with all of this. The fact that you have stuck around when I wasn't as consistent as I should be, Like, it kills me when I'm late on postcards. I've always been late on postcards, but I've been really late. Although I just sent out on, was it 2 days ago? All of the September and October, which means I'm completely up to date on postcards. I've got a few international. I ran out of stamps. They should be here in the next day or two, and I'll get those sent out. But I'm all caught up after this, and I'm going to really try to make sure I get everything on time for you guys. I feel so guilty how late I've been on stuff. One of the things that I found that was making me really sick after this last surgery, I thought this was interesting. I am a bit of a health freak. Well, with a fibromyalgia, I kind of have to be if I want to feel decent. So I don't eat a lot of carbs. I don't eat, I don't eat potatoes or God, I love corn dogs and wish I could have those every day. But I don't eat much breading or rice or, corn, anything like that. Well, they, oh, this actually can come further over. The colors that I'm using here, by the way, just reflect what's in the room. So if you want to put more blues, you can. Don't feel like it has to be this. It would just mean you had more blues in the room. But you're reflecting the colors around you. So even though you're looking at a silver bell, it's going to have browns and greens and blues, and whatever colors are around it are going to pick up in that metal. And so anytime you're painting something metallic, that's what you're watching for. I'll have portions that are what you would expect for silver, and then I have portions that are reflecting what's around it. And that's what's going to make it look very realistic. But I don't remember what I was talking about. I lost my train of thought there. This is why my videos are so heavily edited that go on YouTube, because I do not think in a linear fashion, and I go off on tangents, and then I don't remember what I was talking about. So I apologize for that. So see, I'm just slowly layering. There's not like an exact science. And I think that's something that a lot of people are looking for. They want a formula. There's not. You copy what you see. You draw what you see. What's helpful, I think, in watching tutorials and following tutorials is seeing the layering process. At least for me, that's the most useful thing to see somebody else do. I want to see how they layered different things to get different effects. I can actually pull some of this color a little bit more over here. Oh, I remember what I was talking about health-wise. So I have been drinking. I started drinking right around the time of the last surgery, maybe a couple days before or a week before. I started ordering on Amazon these buy drinks, which I used to get maybe once or twice a week at Target. Has them in the freezer thing or fridge thing. They're what am I looking for? Grays. They're a coconut water type drink that I get the raspberry one, and it's sweetened with stevia, which is supposed to be way better for you. I can't do artificial sweeteners at all. It really angers the fibromyalgia. But with the stevia, that should be fine. That's supposed to be good for you, or so everyone says. And I got to where I was drinking maybe 2, sometimes 3 of those a day. Normally 2 would be what I'd have. And I just had felt like crap ever since the last surgery. I never got over it. And I thought, okay, my fibromyalgia finally had enough, and it's just acting up. I was so tired that I could hardly function. I was sleeping most of the time. I was nauseated all the time. I mean, I really had a hard time. And so, which are all symptoms of fibromyalgia, or how my fibromyalgia reacts with me. So, and I was in pain, which is typical, again, of the fibromyalgia. Everything was hurting. Everything was achy. I was still taking more painkillers than I would expect after this last surgery. This should have been easier than the one before it, but it was so bad. So I ended up, I'm actually going to try a few different pencils here, by the way. Cold gray. I've got a warm gray 4 and a cold gray 4 as well. So I'm actually going to put the warm gray. He's going to go down for a minute. I'm going to stick with the 2 cold grays. But I finally realized, I wonder if it's those buys. That's the only thing that changed around that time. What if I stopped drinking these? Within about 3 days, I felt like a new human. It was incredible how much better I felt. So I started looking it up online, and it turns out there are quite a few people who have the same reaction I did to stevia. A few days later, and I'd been feeling really good, I had some gum, and my gum has xylitol in it, since again, can't do the artificial sweeteners. I got so sick, and I looked it up. Same thing with the xylitol. It has the different problem or side effects for some people. Just can't handle it. So it's something about making your blood sugar drop because your body thinks you're getting sugar and it doesn't. And it aggravated my adrenal glands, which I already have problems with. So yeah, that's why I felt so bad for so long after the last surgery. It was those drinks I was drinking. And I feel, I had a cold this week, but besides that, the difference is incredible since I stopped drinking that. So if you find yourself being in more pain than normal or not feeling well, see if you are eating or drinking something new that might be causing it. Patty said she saw the Circuit Bright Pad giveaway. Bummer, I already bought one. Oh, that was an old giveaway. That one's from months ago. Dan wants to know if I'm done with the surgeries now. Am I doing physical therapy? I don't need any physical therapy. I just need to heal because it was the abscess that caused the problems. So the problem is it doesn't always want to heal right, and they said it can be months. He said basically if it's not perfectly healed in the next 6 months, then we have to go and do the surgeries again. So I've got a long wait till I find out if this is really working. I have a checkup in like 2 weeks, I think. But I mean, my pain levels have dropped significantly since I stopped drinking that. So I was thinking I wasn't healing. I was really stressing out about some of this. Oh my gosh, I feel better now. Who would have thought that something as simple as those drinks? Patty wants to know what else was in the drinks. Most of thumbed juju. Look up it's BAI, and it's their coconut water. I was getting their coconut and raspberry was the flavor I was mostly drinking. But it's BAI. And like my husband drinks them and he has no problem. So I'm not saying that it's this terrible thing no one should have. But different things react to different people, or people react to different things differently. Wow, some redundancy there. But it really, I cannot believe how I feel like a totally new person since I stopped drinking it. And it was slow. It wasn't like an overnight, I drank it once and knew I didn't feel well. It was so slow that I didn't realize. And I guess it builds up in your system. So it took a few days for me to feel better when I stopped drinking it. So got a little transition between my light and my dark, medium gray here. I'm just watching that reference photo. Where are my lights and where are my darks? Yeah, it was really weird. I had gotten to the point where I normally can drink 1 to 2 coffees a day before I get sick. Because I have problems with my adrenal glands, so I really shouldn't have any coffee. But I love it and it makes me happy, so I'm not giving it up. But anyway, with that, I'm going to take this cool gray and start putting the shadows in here too on the inside of the bell. I will color correct a lot of this after I blend most of this out with paint thinner. Right now, I just want some pigment on that paper. But when I was drinking the buys, it got to where I couldn't even have a full cup of coffee without getting really sick, which was weird. And that was just getting worse and worse. Some of this dark here. Now I've got this white line that's going to come through. I'm drawing over mine because I'm going to go over it with Chub Texture Titanium White. If you aren't, let the white of your paper show through if you don't have that product. Okay, let's darken this up even more. See, I'm just gradually going to my darks. I don't need to jump to as dark as I possibly can go everywhere because I don't necessarily want this to be quite as dark as my darkest points. I want it up a bit. And I'm probably going to pull a bluish gray over some of this black so that it doesn't just stay that way. Let's go ahead and blend that out. Actually, I am going to take my white luminance. So the reason I'm going with luminance and not drawing at this point is I want a harder lead that I can push harder on and have a little bit more control with the detail. And I'm going to fill this in to keep it white. And this is what you want to do anywhere where you want to keep the paper really white. Just really get that in there, pushing really hard on that area that I want to keep that highlight. Same up here. That way when I blend over, I don't lose most of that. Got a spot up here that stays really white. And then I can smudge over the rest of this. I'm going to blend that out and then I'll let that dry. And while that dries, we'll start on the bell or the reflection of the bell. Where are my paintbrushes? I keep moving them. Okay, actually, I want to make sure, I'll start with the green. I don't want to smudge the green all into the silver, so I'm going to actually be careful and do that separately. And then I'm going to clean this brush off so I don't smudge green all over the rest of that bell. Cleaning it off of my paint thinner, wiping it off on my paper towel. And I'm going to start with my lighter gray first. This thing can be pretty messy here. I want to be clean around the edge. That's where I've got to be careful and work slowly so I don't do what I did up there and get my paint thinner, make a smudge outside of the line. You can see how I'm working around the green. I'm not just smudging the green because that will turn my cooler grays that color. And see how I can blend right over where I put the white and the pigment doesn't stick to it. I've got that wax-based white pencil protecting the paper. Now this is a little bit grainy and gritty right now. That's fine. I'll do another layer and that will smooth it out. At least one other layer. And see here again, I can smudge right over that white and see how it doesn't really stick to that. If I were to do that over straight white paper, I just try to make eye contact with the camera that is not aimed at me. I'm a genius. But if I did that over white paper, I would leave a smudge over that. I mean, you can see here, I'll do it right there. See how I'm going to end up, that black or dark line isn't going to go away. If I had white there first, that would keep that from happening if I wanted that area to stay white. And that's why I pushed so hard and burnished the paper. I damaged it intentionally so that color wasn't going to stick to it. And then being wax-based, that keeps the other color from sticking to it as well. So it's kind of like a double hit there to protect the paper. Make sure those edges are nice and clean. Now the bill, it's not perfectly round. This one's probably dented. I drop it on it's been dropped on the floor numerous times. So don't worry that it's perfectly shaped there. When you have your different lights and darks reflecting all over, that will adjust or kind of hide when things aren't perfectly circular. But this wouldn't even need to be perfectly circular anyway. But I do want clean, smooth edges. Okay, we're going to let that dry for now. I'm going to put the lid back on my paint thinner. Make sure whatever container you're putting your paint thinner in, it's only for paint thinner and doesn't get confused with where your water goes. I use these, what are they called? Lock and Lock. It's a little container. This thing works really, really well for sealing it out, sealing everything out so I don't get too many spills or anything. I really like that one. It's a nice size. I had a student who was keeping her paint thinner in a water bottle, like the water bottle you drink out of is where she kept it. And it just made me cringe because anyone can come by, pick that up and take a big swig. So make sure that you do that. And if you do ever accidentally drink your paint thinner, don't induce vomiting. Contact the Poison Control Center. They'll tell you. You do not want to induce vomiting because the main risk, it'll just flush through your system. Your system isn't going to absorb it. So the problem is if you vomit it and those fumes, if that ends up or you inhale that into your lungs, that's what causes problems for people. It's a certain type of pneumonia it causes or something like that. So just, pro tip, if you ever accidentally do drink your paint thinner, don't induce vomiting. But the point is, keep it in something that doesn't accidentally happen on anyway. Okay. So now we are going to go into the shadow. And this shadow needs to not be too dark. I want to use a cool gray. Actually, let me go one shade lighter than what I've got out. So I've got a cold gray 3 or 2. Do I have a 3? Do they even make a 3? I don't pay attention to the names normally, so I don't really know. But what are you? You look like a good choice. Yep, cold gray 3. It does exist. Okay. Now this reflection, obviously not black. I'm going to go with a gray, and I want to go with a cool gray here. I can darken it up as needed, and it's easier for me to start too light than to start too dark. So this will be a good choice. I can always darken it up if I need to. And here my edges are much softer than what I'm going to have on the bell. The bell, or the actual bell, is going to have much crisper edges from one value to the next. Here I want it to be nice and soft. We're going to switch to a cold gray 2 as I move out here. We've got another shadow this way. It's really light, so I'm going to stick with that cold gray 2. Should probably switch to a warm gray in some of this. I go up to my cold gray 4. I do want this to be a lot darker. This one really fades out, so I'm going to start with the cold gray 2 and then just build up. So it can get darker in the center and let that fade out to light. I don't want to try to make everything too crisp on the bell here, or too defined, too dark. I want this to be just a hint of a reflection. Now the value of my paper down here gets to be about this color if I were going by my reference photo, but I'm not doing that, so I'm just going to let mine fade out softly. And we've got a definite shadow here. I'm going to add the shadow behind the bell. This will be almost black back here, but I'm going to start with my gray. And then I want to let this fade out. I'm not going to go as dark as it is on the paper because my paper I am leaving so light. Let's see, this really comes out this way. I mean, obviously this is not as dark as I will go, but it is so much safer to start really light and just keep building and building until you get it as dark as you want. And I'll end up burnishing the edges with white here to soften it, just like I did on the ribbon. I've got a bit of a shadow coming under this one. And you don't have to add these shadows. You can leave the shadows out if you don't want to include them in the art. I was going to use graphite for this, but now I'm being lazy, too lazy to grab the graphite, so we'll just do this in colored pencil. It would be softer if I used graphite for some of these gray shadows. See how I'm getting really light, just barely letting that paper touch, or pencil touch. Just hints of that reflection. Now watch when you do reflections. One of the things that a lot of people will make the mistake of is thinking that they can just directly reverse whatever the subject is, flip it upside down. That's not going to look accurate because it depends on the angle. I'm looking here from the underside of the bell that you can't even see on that reference photo, right? So look at what a different perspective you've got between those two. So you can't just reverse one and have it actually look like a reflection. . 'Cause. 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 Just let that fade out. Remember, just look at things in terms of abstract shapes. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and darken up. This should work. I will switch to, what is this? Cold Gray 4. Darker in the middle here, and it's going to fade as it moves out. See, I'm overlapping it onto the gray, but I'm not necessarily going up against the edges. I'm letting it stay really light. I'm actually going to switch over to probably just go ahead and go with black. Whoops, after I throw my pencil. Let's darken up this shadow. But I'm not taking this black and going all the way over all the gray. See how I'm focusing on the darkest area and letting that get lighter and lighter as I fade out. Gotta make sure those edges are really crisp right against that bow. One thing you can do too, if you're working on controlling how much pressure you add to a pencil, practice drawing some stuff in graphite only with one pencil. So what I used to use is I used to use the Prismacolor Ebony, which I don't like at all anymore. It's too silvery for me. But the General's Layout Extra Black is a really good graphite pencil. And I would do my entire graphite drawings with that one pencil. I controlled how light or dark things were based on how much pressure I added to the pencil. Now, while that may not be the best technique for graphite, it does, go ahead and start adding some of the shadows up in that bell again. It does really teach you a lot of control with your hand with how much pressure you're adding to that pencil when that's the only way you're controlling your values. You're using one pencil for everything. Little hints of lines. I'm going to use a reflection, a little bit of green. Actually, we'll use the earth green again. So it's kind of a grayish green right on the border between the dark gray and the white. Now, one of the things that you want to watch with shadows when you're trying to make them look realistic, they're not going to be even all the way across. If you look at the reference photo, it's much darker and you get a lot of light areas where it fades out. That's something to watch for when you're drawing shadows. So this is going to get way darker. And then get way lighter. I'm even going to add a little bit of green on top of that gray. So I've got the reflection of the bow there. I'm going to pull a little bit of this green over here too, not too much. Okay, I'm going to go with a light gray over the rest of the bell here. I can just be really loose and messy. Everywhere I left the white. Not everywhere, most of the spots. Okay, I'm going to blend that. and we'll go back up to the bell, or the main bell. Let's go ahead and just start here. It's gonna be pretty messy. I'm okay if some of this blends or stains some of the paper. So even I am putting it over the white areas of the paper that don't have colored pencil yet. That's fine. So I can just cover some of this with the bell. I don't want to put it out here where I want the paper to stay white though. Patty said that her polychromos green, earth green is a stub, and it's the third one she's bought. Yeah, that's one I use a lot too. There are a few like that Caput Mortem, the one I always say wrong. That one is one that I use like crazy too. I go through those pencils like pretty quickly. I don't want too much paint thinner on the brush because I don't want to stain outside of the area I'm working on. Again, keep those edges clean up against that bow, or the ribbon, whatever. Okay, I'm going to let that set. I'm going to go back up to the bell. Put the lid back on my paint thinner. Oops. So this is the fun part to me because we just start to make everything look cleaner. I mean, we've got everything blocked in. Now is the time, and this is the time that a lot of people would call it finished. But watch what happens from this stage to spending another 30 minutes or so just hyping up your contrast in different areas. It's like here, I want this to be really dark, and my polychromos is perfect for this because it's keeps such a nice point. I am pushing a bit harder because I do want that to be really, really dark. And just that one thing, I mean, look how much shinier the metal looks, just getting that contrast up in this area. And I'm going to make that black look even deeper by putting a little bit of magenta and blue over it. It looks like I've got a little bit of green just along here. going to take my Beastray, whatever I'm not saying right color, and deepen up these browns. Basically, I'm just deepening up all of the colors here. Now let's grab, let's see, that one. Okay, I'm going to use dark indigo and which one is this? Red violet. Basically, find a cool blue and a kind of magenta type color, and you can put that over your black, and these two will make the black seem even darker or deeper. I'm also going to pull some of this into the browns too, just to warm them up. They're looking a little flat. Patty says no silver colored pencil. They actually have them. I don't use them. I don't want glittery looks in my work. It's funny. I'm in a group that's for crafters. One of my friends added me to. And I guess there's a big drama right now. They're talking about, the governments are talking about making glitter, speaking of glitter, making it illegal because of the environmental damage, which I can understand. I see where that's a problem. Crafters are really upset about this. It's kind of interesting. I'd imagine there'd be another way to make something that's similar to glitter without the problems with making it out of plastic. I'm going to add this magenta over here as well. I'm going to overlap some of that into that brownish tone. But adding these colors makes it look so much deeper than just going with brown, black, and grays. So now I'm going to use my dark indigo, which as you can see, I use a lot of these two colors because I always put them on top of black. You can do the blue first and then the magenta on top. You'll get a slightly different result. I would try that on your scratch paper to see which you like better. In some areas I'm going to let be a little bit more blue, some a little bit more magenta, just to get variation in there, because I think it looks nice. Especially with around some of the silver, I'm going to go ahead and pull some of the blue into it more. Really lightly, I just want to tint that color. Not too much. Actually, I do need to pull more gray though. All along here, that's going to need to be much darker. Pushing a lot harder here where I need this to be really thick. And once I put the white highlights, that will make a big difference. I'm pushing really hard, sharp pencil, getting a really crisp line there. I'm still using that indigo blue or dark, what is it? Dark indigo for these shadows. This is just layering on top of that gray and black that I did earlier. So right here, it looks like I've got a little bit of a point there. I need to round that off. I'll just widen up that bell a bit to fix that. I'm going to, yeah, I can layer some of this blue into that shadow. Using some of the same blue into the shadows below the bell. That paper is dry enough now. Again, very light hand here. Just tinting that color. Patty wants to know why not break out the Inktense black, because that is a water-based pencil, and I don't want to put a water-based product on top of an oil or wax-based product. They are not compatible. You will end up with archival issues. Now, I could have started with Inktense and then went on top of that with colored pencil. That's a suitable way to go. But you don't want to do it the other way around. And I already have colored pencil on this. This dark indigo is working really nicely for some of these reflections on the bottom here. Patty says she started out as a scrapbooker, but was always glitter glue challenged. I think glitter is so pretty, but I kind of try to avoid it because it ends up everywhere. I didn't realize until reading those articles, if what they're saying is true, how much damage it causes to the environment. That's pretty disturbing and pointless, in which case, if that's it, I mean, we don't really need glitter. It's hard to read through some of the news reports, though, and figure out, okay, what's fact and what is somebody just wants to make a big deal out of something for the attention. It's so hard to tell these days. A lot of this will be softened out when I go over it with the Derwent drawing pencil. Okay. Let's go ahead and blend this out and see where we're at. Now, I'm starting with the darker black, so I've got to be careful as I blend into any lighter areas not to smudge too much of that black where I don't want it. So see how I'm being very careful as I move around at this point. I'm not being as sloppy, just brushing this everywhere like I did on the first layers. And so this looks black, but it's more more deep of a deep black. When you see it in person, you've got a lot more depth to it because of the blue and the magenta in there. As subtle as that is, it really does make a big difference. One second, texting my mom. I normally talk to her on the phone every day at this time. So she was just calling to see if I'm done. 1 second, so she doesn't think I'm just ignoring her. Okay. I sent her a heart. We're all good. Just lightly going over some of this. That hint of blue looks really nice. I'm liking that on the bell on the bottom, or the reflection. Molly wants to know if water-soluble graphite is light fast. As far as I know, it is. And it's weird because I heard when I first did a video using that stuff, I had someone telling me that it was not light fast. When I talked to the Faber-Castell rep in March, they said they'd never heard anything like that. As far as anyone I can find is saying, yeah, it's graphite. It's light fast. Graphite doesn't really fade. So I really don't know. I know that Graphite Tint is not light fast. But as far as regular water soluble graphite, I thought that was interesting because I was under the impression it was not after that one person was insisting that it wasn't. But I don't know where they got that information because Faber-Castell told me they'd never heard anything like that. Now, it is possible for a rep just to not be aware of something. I'm not going to say that rep definitely knew all the things, but basically, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it is from everything I've read. EJS wants to know how my testing is going with the Inktense and Lightfast. Well, being that I've not done it yet, it's not going well. But the Inktense that I have behind Lightfast glass that's on my own wall, that hasn't faded at all in the last few years. I've got a red panda that's been on display for about almost 3 years now. Not quite 3. And so far, so good. Not that that's a good... sorry, stretching. Not that that's a good indication of how Lightfast it's going to be, but Derwent recently released, or so I've been told, I haven't seen it yet myself, I need to get a hold of it, but supposedly they went through recently and did test the Lightfastness when water was added, and the results were a lot better than we were expecting. Yeah, they may not be as Lightfast wet when dry, but some of them were, and some of them were really, really good. So I'm actually really excited to see those results. That was really encouraging to me. Because it was something like over half were still Lightfast. If that's the case, then we can use it in some of our artwork that we're selling if we are using just the Lightfast colors. So I'm interested to get a bit more information on that. Okay, I'm going to pull a bit more of the indigo, just barely adding pressure. And I will blend this out with the odorless mineral spirits once that's on there. Apparently need a little bit more on my brush after I throw the pencil on the floor. Hope I don't need that one again. That's not going to be easy to get to. And whenever anything's not smooth, I mean, if you want smoother than what you have here, you're just going to keep layering and repeating the process until you get it just as smooth as you want it to be. Okay, so I'm actually going to switch over to my Derwent drawing. We're going to start working on some of these highlights. Finish that guy up. So I'm going to add some highlights with this. Now, when I add the highlights with the white on the pencil, I'm going to lighten the color. It's not going to be as rich, so I can come back on top with a yellow. If that does not brighten it up enough, then I may want to use my titanium white transparent mixing. No. Yes. The titanium white, and I'm getting tired. My brain is really shutting down now. The titanium white and touch-up texture mixture, I can add white and then put the brighter yellow on top, which is definitely what I'm going to be doing on a few of these areas that I apparently got a little out of control on. I'm going to take this yellow, and I don't even need to blend this out with odorless mineral spirits at this point. I'm not getting a grainy, gritty look, and I'm almost burnishing. I'm putting a little bit more pressure. I want to darken up these ends quite a bit, and I want to use a warmer green. So I'm going to switch to, let's see. That actually should work. This one is my pine green. That's the one I grabbed, right? Okay. I'm going to darken up. Karen wants to know if I always tell my buyers about Lightfastness. Well, I won't sell something that is not Lightfast. So no, it's not something that I really discuss with them. A buyer should be able to assume that what they're buying from you is Lightfast. If it's not Lightfast, I don't sell it. That's not something that I think is fair to a buyer, because you may tell a buyer, okay, well, it's not Lightfast. They don't understand what that means. Most of them don't. So they may be like, okay, that's fine, whatever, without really understanding what you just told them. So my rule is, if it's not Lightfast, it doesn't get sold. I'm going to add a bit of a shadow on this side of the ribbon here. And that's going to fade out. So I've got it where it's sharper there. I'm going to pull that ribbon back a little bit thicker than my shadow, or coming out further than that. I don't remember what color I last blended with that brush, so I'm going to make sure I clean my blending brush out with paint thinner really well first. Yeah, there's a guy who was selling at a supposed art gallery. I'm going to use that in quotations. I've talked about this before. But their son had built a bit of a name for himself, and his work was selling for a decent amount. But his work was being done on like newspaper print, things that are going to yellow and completely change over time. His buyers had no clue. I don't think he had a clue that you can't just use anything and expect it to stay looking the same. But he was using things that are going to yellow, that are going to fade, that are going to disintegrate because they're not intended as art supplies, and selling them for thousands of dollars. And that's just not fair to the buyer. That actually made me angry to see, because good, part of me was like, well, good for you for building a name for yourself that they're willing to pay that for something that you made out of newspaper print. The other side of this is none of these people have any clue that this is not going to last. They were new to art. They just thought it was cool, and what they were buying was going to, it's art, it'll last. Nope. This here has too much of a warm green. I'm going to take this color on top before I burnish my white over it. And I'm going to take a lighter gray here and fade this out. And on this side, let's see, it looks like I've got a little bit of a reflection here. Let's put some of this into the bell too, a little bit of this aqua color. Yeah, I like how that looks. So see, this isn't on my drawing. That color is not there, but I think it looks nice. Don't marry your reference photo. Use it for what you need to, but if there's something that you think might look nicer if you adjust, do it. You're an artist, not a photographer. Well, you may be a photographer too, but when you're doing the art, feel free to experiment and try different things that might look nicer. So I'm just messing with little details. Let's add a highlight here, a highlight there, not because it's on the reference photo, just because, hey, let's see if this looks nice. If it doesn't, I'll put the dark color right back over it. Yeah, the only time I've sold ink tints, because again, it's not Lightfast, is back to Derwent. Well, Derwent's perfectly aware of their Lightfast stuff, so with them, I'm not too worried about it. But because they did buy, although they're still here, they bought the, hired me to paint the tins. I'm still waiting to hear back if they want that original artwork or if I can keep it for photos. I would rather keep it so I can use it for photo stuff, but it technically is theirs. I'm going to take a cooler blue that I have not used anywhere else, which means I'm going to have to pull this in a few areas, but I want to add that to that shadow. So here's my warmer blue, that aqua color. This is more of a purpley, or closer to purple. It's like a periwinkle blue. It's a cooler blue. I'm going to add that into some of the shadows. I just think it might look nice. Just that little pop of color. Again, that question I constantly get, well, how do you know to use that color? It's not in the reference photo. I didn't. I want to see what it looks like. Does it look good? Experiment with it. Don't be afraid. What's the worst that happens? This blue I put here looks terrible. Okay, if it does, I'll put black over it again where it was. Not a problem. Don't get so afraid of your colors, of something not going right, that you don't experiment. Especially in the beginning. If you're a new artist, let's say you've been painting for 3 years, 4 years. It's not that big of a deal. You're probably not entering a whole lot of competitions at this point. Experiment. Learn what you need to learn now so that when you do enter, if you decide you like competitions or you are taking a bunch of commissions, you've already made those either mistakes or wins. You know if you think that color would look nice before you even do it. Make your mistakes. Be proud of those mistakes. That means you learned something. Okay. So what I need to do now, this needs to pretty much dry, and then I can put my highlights over it. Most of this is dry. Actually, some of this I can start putting some highlights. So, okay, I'm going to use my luminance versus the Derwent drawing because this is a small area. If it was bigger, I'd probably go with Derwent drawing because it's more opaque. But I can push a little bit harder with this pencil. Derwent drawing is very brittle. Add that highlight back in there inside the bell. Pull another highlight inside there. And when I come through with the highlights, especially with the touch-up texture titanium white, you're going to see a huge difference. Actually, I need to warm this up just a bit. Some of this reflection, let's see, not there, over here. Get a little bit of browns. So if you look at the reference photo, this has more detail than I'm going to include. I don't need that much. I want a hint of the reflection, but I don't need to sit there and have every line exact. No one's going to know the difference but you guys. Jackie wants to know if there will be a horizon line. Nope, I'm leaving it just like this. And in the reference photo, there's no line there because you're looking down on top of it. I'm going to pull this blue into that shadow again. Now, I do think this would be more striking if the background wasn't perfectly white, but that would make for a very, very long live stream that I am not up to sitting here. That I love you guys, but you know, we only need to spend so much time with each other. But if you want to put a background on this, you can, and I think it would make it look very striking. I think it would look very, very nice. Even if it's just gray, I mean, you can do that with your graphite pencil. Pull that ribbon and highlight up a little bit more. And I'm just going to fuss with some little details. Now, I did need to take my white luminance and tone this way down now that that's dried. So I can tone that shadow down and it makes it look nice and soft. I'm just scribbling loosely over this. So like this white isn't going to look as white as it does in the reference photo because I don't have the dark next to it. It will never look light enough without having the darks dark. Ooh, that sounds out good. Let me sharpen this pencil a little bit. You can tell I get excited or surprised sometimes. I am, because you don't always know what's going to happen. I think one of the things I've often seen students when I'm working with them in person, they seem to think I know everything. I don't always know what's going to happen, but I'm willing to try it and see, because that's how you figure out how to make something look good. But sometimes I'm just as surprised as you are. But I've made the mistakes often enough, I know how to fix them. So it's not a big deal if it didn't work out for me. Patty wants to know about those little perforated seam lines on the edge of the ribbons. How do you do those? Okay, if you want to do that and make it look super realistic, I would draw this big, like 16 by 20 inches. I would go really, really big so that you can get those tiny details. I can sit in here and make the little dots and the little sections, and they'll kind of look right. But if you really want to make that sort of thing look very, very realistic, and you want that kind of like hyper realistic detail, work bigger. This is not big enough that I would even bother with that personally. But if that is something you're interested in, work really, really large, then it's easy to get that little detail. And it's just sitting there and doing the little texture and the little detail. Karen wants to know about doing this on colored paper. Absolutely. I actually was originally planning to do this, and I kind of wish I had now, on blue Metans paper, the Canson Metans, because that would have allowed me to get my highlights and such. I think that would have looked really nice. The reason that I didn't is I knew that a lot of people wouldn't have that with them. And if you wanted to follow along, I wanted to make it a little bit easier for you to do so. But yes, toned paper would absolutely be the ideal choice for this. I really did. I was originally planning on using that and decided against it just because I figured more people would have a white paper. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to pull some of these highlights in. And this, I don't even care if this is perfect here. I mean, I'm drawing lines. So I'm like, yeah, it's somewhere around there. There's a highlight. This doesn't really matter. Pushing really hard to get that to stand out. Okay, let's get out the titanium white and touch-up texture mixture. So what I mixed that in, Hopefully I brought it back in here after I cleaned it last night. Oh, hold on. There it is. So what I'm using is the top of a little condiment cup that has a polychromos UPC code on it. But this is just the top of a condiment cup. They're little cups that you can get at the grocery store, and I just keep reusing them. It's one of these, and the lid is my favorite part. And I've been using the same lid for months. So what I'm going to do is this is the Touch of Texture Titanium White that you can get from brushandpencil.com. If you're in the UK, Jackson's Art Supply has it. If you're in Canada, that would be Delta Art Supplies. I forget where it is in Australia and some of the other locations. You'd need to contact Brush and Pencil for that. Okay, now let me find it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I've got two products here. Colored Pencil Titanium White, this is a powder. And I've got the Colored Pencil Touch-Up Texture. Now this stuff has a white, you'll see the white film at the bottom. You want to mix this up until that is all mixed evenly. See how now it's starting to get lighter on areas? I need this to be completely even all the way through. So I'm going to shake that really, really well. Now I'm going to take some of my titanium white. Make sure you do this with the titanium white and not accidentally your powder blender. I've done that before. It doesn't work. I'm going to just dab a little bit of that on there. I don't need much. I'm not going to do this part on camera because I will make a giant mess. I'm just going to pour a little bit of my touch-up texture liquid on top of what I just poured out with the powder. Just a few drops. I'm going to take a liner brush. This is a number 2 synthetic hog hair. And I'm going to mix the powder and that liquid. And there's no definite formula. I just mix enough that I've got a consistency that's kind of similar to whiteout. It's going to flow nice. I'm going to have chunks in there. That's okay. And if a chunk ends up on my drawing, I just pick it out with my nail. It doesn't hurt anything. Okay. So now we've got some dots of shine here. And then I've got this really nice, definite white. Mine's pretty white because I did protect that paper really well with my luminance. Got a white here. See, I'm going to come inside the gray so you can still see that outline. Got some dots there so that it makes the white stand out. If I put the white right up against the white paper, it doesn't look shiny. It just looks like the white paper came in. So I'll probably even outline the dark next to it a little bit. Little shines. Remember, with a liner brush, the harder you push, the thicker your line. If you just barely let that touch, you'll get a thinner line. I want this to be really white. I'm just going to go ahead and fill this in to make sure it stays nice and clean. Got a highlight here. Get some dots. Now this highlight doesn't really need to be there, and it's almost looking like two eyes. So what I'm going to do when this dries, I'm going to darken that up. I'm not sure why I left that as light as I did. That is too light. Patty wants to know the difference between this and Copic White. I don't know what Copic White is, the marker. If you mean the marker, that is not really archival. This is archival. This is the only white I know of that you can put on top of colored pencil, and it's going to be archival. Nothing else was really meant to go on top of a wax or oil-based product. So when you're using a water-based product on top, it isn't necessarily going to stick long-term, and you can have some problems there. Just dab that. Some of these shine marks are not quite where they are on the reference photo, but if I put them where they are in the reference photo, it should be up against the white of the paper. Again, that won't show up. So I still want them to look shiny, so I added them in slightly different places. Okay, now some of this bow I really want to stand out more. So I'm going to go ahead and put white, and then I will put the green on top. Because right now it's a bit dull. Some dots for that texture. I'm able to get some smaller detail than what I would have been able to get just with the pencil. And again, if you want tiny detail, let's say you want to have all that texture in the ribbon, you can do it. It's not hard to do, but you have to work really large so that you can get that type of texture. Now, I have seen people do that on a small scale. That doesn't look like an enjoyable process to me. That's up to you if you want to do that. But it works. If you work larger, it's a lot easier to get the tiny, tiny detail. I've got a couple of you from California. That's where I'm originally from. I'm reading the comments. A few little highlights here, but not too much. Most of the highlights I want are on the top of the bow. So this is really where you're focused in, is here. Now, when you mix your titanium white touch-up texture mixture, don't mix a lot because it dries quickly. And if you mix a lot, it still dries quickly. And if you put a lid on it, it still dries quickly. Mix a small amount, use it. If you need to mix more, go rinse off everything and you make your brush and your palette, little whatever container you're mixing it in, and then go ahead and make more. But don't mix too much right off the bat because you'll waste a lot of product. That's probably all I need from the super shiny. Oh, we'll put a little bit in here. Okay, now I'm going to be right back. I need to rinse this brush before it gets damaged. Give me 20 seconds and I will be right back over here. Okay. You don't want to let that stuff dry on the brush. It doesn't clean very well. So that's why I just went and rinsed that off. Okay, so I've just got a couple little things I want to do on this one now. Now is the time where I'm not really as focused on the reference photo. I'm more focused on, I think it might look better if this was darker here or a lighter there. And I've got to wait for these white highlights to dry all the way so that I can put the brighter green yellow on top of them. If I try to do that right now, that white is just going to chip off the paper. And that's a big mistake that a lot of people make, is that they try to put color on top of it too soon. Let it dry all the way first. Take some of this earth green, and I'm going to tone some of this down just a little. Mostly at this point I'm just fussing with it because I'm waiting for it to dry so that I can put the color where I need to, so I can call it done. Now, if you look at what I have here and you look at your reference photo, this is not exact. Very little of the, I mean, it's close, but it is not exact. And the reason that I'm pointing that out is so often when we're painting or drawing things, if it's not exact, we're not happy with it. It doesn't need to be exact. It's art. It needs to look nice. I like how it looks. I think it looks nice, even though it doesn't look exact. So try to remember, things don't have to look exact. Yeah, when you're working on portraits, it turns into a bit of a different situation where you need to be a lot closer. But other than that, I mean, I don't think it looks bad because it doesn't look, not being exactly the same, it doesn't mean bad. And like these ribbons, again, would look so much better, I think, if I was up against a darker background. That the Canson Me10's blue, the light blue, would have been perfect for this. So if you have that option, that's good. Yeah, Patty said the Copic markers are a scrapbooking thing, comes mixed in a jar and used just like you're using the titanium white. I don't know about that, and so I'm not going to say, but I know in general, none of the gel pens, the markers, none of that would I use on top of colored pencil and consider it to be archival. I have seen so many problems with that over time. So with scrapbooking, you guys, when you're scrapbooking, you don't worry as much about it. I just lost my sharpener. You don't worry about archival things as much because that's not something you expect to last 100 years. When you're working on art, the rules change quite a bit. And I think that's one of the reasons that we see a lot of confusion with like baby oil. You have a lot of artists who just swear by using baby oil to blend colored pencil. Okay, when you were scrapbooking, that's fine. When you're creating artwork that you want to last a lifetime, that's no longer fine. That's no longer a suitable medium to mix in. And it's definitely something I see a lot with YouTube, some of the comments that people will make. Oh, so-and-so said to use this. Yes, that's a scrapbook thing. That's okay in scrapbook. Not okay with archival art. You have a little bit more freedom when you're working with scrapbooking. I mean, you still have to use acid-free materials and such because you don't want to damage the photos. But as far as the artistic portion of the scrapbook that you're doing besides the photos, that you've got a lot more freedom in. Okay, I'm going to risk it. Let's see if this yellow will show up or if I'm going to make it chip. Okay, I'm just not pushing very hard. It really should sit longer than what I let it set. Look how that stands out. It is so bright and so pretty. And there's no other way to do that besides getting the white on there first, let it dry, and then I can get this nice, bright, bold highlight. Now, the other way to do that would just have been to keep this color clean to begin with, but I am messy. And that's okay because I can fix this. And again, this should dry longer than what I just let it dry. I'm running a very high risk of making that chip off. I'm barely pushing. Some of it's chipping a little bit because of that. Once it's done, it's fine. It's just, while you're working, that can happen. If you're having it chip off, it's because it's not dry enough. There we go. That looks better. I would like this a little darker. See, and I can sit and fuss with this for the next 2 hours. I'm not going to, but you can keep messing with it and messing with it. Just little details here and there to touch up and make things stand out or tone down. My stomach is growling too loud for me to mess with this much longer. A little bit in here, not too much. I'm actually going to tone this portion of the ribbon down too with the black. And see, these are at a point where I don't need to blend out with the odorless mineral spirits because I have so much pigment on the paper. I'm not fighting against the white of the paper anymore, and it still looks smooth. So I don't really need to go back over that. And I think we're done. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, I missed the spot. This I wanted to be more yellow. So then we can sign it. And that is it. We are done. If you guys draw this, or if you've been drawing this along with me, please post photos of it either on social media. You can post over on Facebook, wherever you can find me. I would love to see what you guys have created. Let's sharpen this up a little. I'm just taking gray because that edge is just a mess. That's a bit better. See, even though there's not gray in the photo, it looks better in mine. Just sharpen that up. I just like it better. Okay, we are done. I am going to eat. Thank you guys so much for joining me. And this video, I'm going to leave up. So if I'm not sure, it may take a little bit to process on YouTube before it's available to rewatch. But you can watch this as many times as you want if you're going to follow along and really want to try doing this again or with different colors. You are welcome to do that. But I will see you guys later, and yeah, I should be working on the next couple of days. I'll get your reference photos together, and all the stuff that I've been laid on, and your postcards should be arriving within the next day or two. If you're outside of the US, that's going to take a bit longer, and some of those haven't been shipped yet because I ran out of stamps, which should be here any day now. So your postcard should be there very, very soon. Thanks again for joining me, and I will see you guys later. If I can figure out how to turn this off. Whoops. I may or may not still be here. I don't know. I just screwed up the page. There we go. I'll talk to you later.